Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last session for today. My name is Heather Ward, and I am the Content Strategy Director at SCA. And so I'm here to introduce our next speaker, Spencer Ross. He is Assistant Professor of Marketing from Manning School of Business, University of Massachusetts, Lowell. His research interests focus on marketing and public policy and on consumer engagement with digital marketing innovations. So please welcome Professor Ross to discuss marketing principles for environmental, social, and financial sustainability.
Thank you for having me, Heather. It's a pleasure to be here. Over the next hour, I'm going to discuss marketing principles. This is kind of I know there's been a lot of technical stuff over the course of the day, and I've been able to kind of catch a couple of things here and there. This is going to kind of bring us back to the basics, which I guess is nice at the end of the day, just to kind of simplify. This is a kind of a 1-hour version of an entire semester course that I normally teach to my students. And in fact, we were actually talking today about retail in class. And so a couple of the things that were on during the in-between classes, my students got to see. And we actually got to discuss a couple of ideas that had popped up from today. So with that, I am Assistant Professor of Marketing at the Manning School of Business here at University of Massachusetts, Lowell. As Heather mentioned, I typically research sustainable consumption behaviors, why consumers sustain ethically, equitably. As well, I'm interested in digital technology and the role that it plays in consumers' lives, and kind of how we bridge the gap between technology and sustainability in the lives of consumers. I've been a long-time specialty coffee fan, and so I've always kind of wanted to get a chance to talk about specialty coffee relative to some of the things that I teach in class. So with that, I'll start off by discussing a little bit about what marketing is from a little bit of an academic standpoint. We'll talk a little bit about the marketing context, doing a little bit of marketing research. I know that several presenters over the course of the next, these 2 days have done market segmentation and target marketing and brand positioning. And then we'll talk about ways that value is created, captured, communicated, and delivered to consumers. All of this is kind of in an hour. So any specific questions that you have, feel free. I'll be on and around for a little bit after this for Q&A. And I'd certainly welcome anybody to reach out at another point in time as well. So what is marketing? Okay. We typically think of marketing as just advertising, as just sales, but marketing actually is a lot more than just that. This was actually the last time, maybe some people recognize this. This was 2 years ago at the SEA Expo in Boston. I had actually a chance to present there as one of the lectures on consumer indifference to sustainability. And while I was there, I got a chance to go around, visit various booths, and I took this from kind of the top of the floor as everybody was getting ready to showcase their wares. And I thought that it kind of makes sense to go back to what marketing is. The American Marketing Association has a formal definition of what marketing is, but I particularly am interested in sustainable marketing and sustainable consumption, which means that we need to have a definition that is a little bit more expansive than just marketing itself. So the formal definition, so a couple of colleagues of mine, one in particular at Ithaca College, had kind of leveraged the traditional marketing definition alongside something some of you may have heard of before, which is called the triple bottom line. Environmental, social, and economic elements of success. And he kind of took some of these ideas and came up with an idea of what sustainable marketing is. And as you can see here, it's the strategic creation, communication, delivery, and exchange of offerings that produce value through consumption behaviors, business practices, and the marketplace, while lowering harm to the environment and ethically and equitably increasing the quality of life and well-being of consumers and global stakeholders presently and for future generations. All right, now there's a lot to unpack with that definition, and I often give these types of definitions to my students in class, and what we do is we kind of break down some of the pieces of the definition. And in fact, that's kind of what we'll be doing over the next almost hour as we go through this, okay? So one of the things that I think is important within the framework of this definition is something. This is what I've highlighted or put in the red box here, which is to say that it is an exchange of offerings that produce value. At its core, if we were to look at this from kind of a scholarly perspective or in a more academic perspective, the idea of marketing is that we exchange value offerings. And in coffee, and in specialty coffee in particular, there are a variety of different things that we actually exchange that produce value. So, for example, we can talk about coffee as the main product, the main source of why we're all here, that we want to be able to share good coffees with other people, that we want to be able to promote coffees from various origins to consumers, and so on. But coffee, and specialty coffee industry in particular, focuses a lot around community as well as collaboration. And so from a retail context, there is value that is produced that is not just about the coffee bean itself, but is about other things, other services, and other elements of society that help improve well-being. At its core, marketing is about this value exchange. And in value exchange, we see resources that are both economic, the idea that we can actually just perform straight economic transactions, as well as relational. So there are psychosocial elements as well, where we build networks, we create relationships with customers, we create relationships with suppliers, with other people in the industry, and all of those things are vastly enmeshed to create value and exchange value. So then we ask, what is value? And I often tell my students, and I hit them over the head with this quite often, that value is a ratio of perceived benefits to perceived costs. So when we talk about things later on, like pricing, for example, yes, we can talk about pure economic value, pure how much things cost, but that is not the only value that is derived from these types of exchange in specialty coffee. So as you can see here, for example, customers are looking for both utilitarian value, the idea that they can just get a caffeine fix, that they can support the community, but they also want to have a good quality cup of coffee. They want to be able to sit down in a coffee shop once things reopen and be able to read a book. They might want the convenience of just being able to pick something up on the way and on the way to work and use an app. So there are certain benefits that consumers want, but it's not just the fact that they're paying you a particular price for this. It's the idea that they're paying with their convenience, by the idea that they want something quick, maybe they want something slow, maybe they're learning something new about coffee or about particular origin or a particular farmer. And all of these things are things that consumers are giving up or asking for, that is part of this value proposition. Different consumer markets will find different perceived value accordingly. So value creates relationships, which in turn create this value. And that value can be either on an individual personal level, it can be at the retail level at a particular store or with a particular roastery, or it can be at the societal level, which includes global stakeholders such as farmers and producers. When we talk about the triple bottom line, we do so in the context of these three spheres of sustainability. And again, as I mentioned, this is kind of the standard over the last 2 decades of business research, which is to say the environmental bottom line, the social bottom line, and the economic bottom line. But because this is not just about value from a transactional perspective, it is also about value from a relational perspective. It's important for us to look at this not just from how many dollars or how many ways that I can quantify this. Oftentimes businesses now, and particularly in relation to younger consumers, are looking at purpose-driven marketing. That is to say, they're not just looking at bottom line as a bolt-on to what they're currently doing to say, okay, here's how we quantify environmental costs. Here's how we quantify economic costs. Here's how we quantify social costs. Here's how we quantify whether we are producing well enough on the social element, whether we're producing well enough on the environmental element, but actually have it embedded intrinsically to the purpose of what shops are doing, of what roasters are doing, and so forth. So we're going to cover this is kind of three different parts. First, we'll deal with organizational objectives and planning. We'll deal with market segmentation and target marketing and brand positioning, which I know that there are various speakers who've discussed over today and tomorrow. And we'll talk about what we call the marketing mix, some of these strategies and tactics used to execute. The first thing is to, why we are trying to do any sort of planning for value exchange. For some people, for some businesses, this may be a first time that you're looking at what your role in the marketplace is, what your role in specialty coffee is. For others, this may be an opportunity just to start over and think about and take stock of what you're currently doing to be able to look forward to the future. So why do we bother developing a marketing plan? Well, first of all, we're looking to reflect on our business goals, our purpose, and our values. And I think that's important to say because particularly, as I mentioned, if we look at consumers that are Gen Z, and perhaps even as we're looking ahead, as they call them, Generation Alpha, we're looking towards a consumer who is looking at this purpose-driven toward a value, and we need to reflect on how exactly we are communicating that value, how we are creating that value, how we are capturing that value, and how we're delivering that value. The second is by creating a marketing plan, it gives you something tangible to look at to develop these broad strategies, to be able to look at specific tactics that help achieve business goals. Sometimes it is just easy enough to say, let's put something down on paper to be able to actually concretely and tangibly assess and look at what it is this business is actually doing. And in doing so, it provides an option for number three, charting an instructional path to success over a period of time. So oftentimes marketing plans are time bound. That is to say, we are looking at a 1 year, a 3 year, a 5 year horizon at which we can kind of establish how it is that we are doing and whether or not we are actually achieving any form of success with these marketing plans. One other reason, or a major reason why you might do this, is because there are obviously a lot of roasters, a lot of cafes out there. This was a map that was created by Sprudge early in the COVID-19 pandemic that looked at how many different roasters were still operating early on. And as you can see, even during the early days of the pandemic, there were quite a few roasters around the world who are operating. And so standing out and being able to provide that value to consumers becomes important. Knowing what you're doing and how you can do it differently becomes important. Even locally to me, I zoomed in on the map of the greater Boston area, and you can see that even within the context of my geolocation, there are still plenty of cafes that were open at the beginning of COVID. And I'm not sure if that map has been updated since, but it certainly makes for needing distinction and being able to have a market that understands what it is you do and who you actually are. So having a marketing plan is still relevant to coffee folks for a number of reasons. You might consider what things you're hoping to achieve, what things you're offering consumers, how you can otherwise equitably serve customers and other stakeholders in the value chain. How do you send value back up to farmers? How do you manage relationships with your suppliers? Again, having a concrete, tangible plan puts this all into a perspective that is tangible. Where you can actually assess what it is you're doing. And, it's easy to do some back of the napkin sort of planning, some back of the napkin sort of strategy, but sometimes it requires something a little bit more robust. So we will cover some of the basic elements in the marketing plan. The first is the business or mission statement that you might otherwise have. The second deals with the situational analysis, or a SWOT. The third is dealing with marketing objectives, followed by the marketing program or the marketing mix, and the actual implementation, evaluation, and control. Let's start with the market context. Okay. The first thing is, I think a lot of companies, particularly new companies, lack some sort of vision or some sort of mission in terms of what success looks like for your company. It is very easy, I think, to start a business and say, I want to do this, I want to serve good coffee, I want to be able to have, showcase a particular region to a consumer and so on. But that doesn't necessarily provide you with any sort of purpose or direction for what it is that you're looking to do. So figuring out some sort of mission statement that helps with shaping what the purpose of the business is helps to put you in a position where you can actually increase stakeholder value. Are you looking to increase revenues or regional growth? Are you looking to ensure farmers and baristas are getting a living wage? Are you looking to provide a community oasis in a specialty coffee desert? Like, even though that map that I showed you is kind of saturated in some areas, there are certainly areas where there is not good coffee, and maybe you're the first person to that area. Maybe it's disrupting these historical misconceptions of the value chain. All of these need to be done in the context of goal development. So defining who you are and who you're going to be as a coffee shop, answering these types of purpose-driven questions will help you ultimately set what we call SMART goals. They will help you achieve goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant to your organization and what your interests are, and also timely. So they will ultimately get you to think about how long it's going to take you to achieve some of these goals, and also what you need to do to actually execute and achieve them. To do this, we start off looking at the competitive environment. And oftentimes this starts, and I like this little bullseye graphic because it kind of goes from the outside in, right? We start with the macro environment on the outside. What is going on around us? What is going on around the shop that you're looking to open up or currently is open? What is going on in the industry? If it is local, maybe there are competitors around, and then ultimately reflecting in on the organization itself. There are various analytical tools we might use to assess the business environment, and unfortunately, I don't have time to be able to get into all of them. However, I think it's at this point where we are particularly focusing on what matters for equitability in the marketplace. So in particular, as we look at physical marketplaces as they reopen following COVID, we're interested in looking at local histories and local sensitivities in developing new retail outlets. We also are interested in looking at various communities and the communities that we are operating in and how we can actually integrate ourselves with being a diverse, with diversity. We also are interested in digital market spaces, particularly during COVID-19. I know there's been a couple of presentations today that have discussed the fact that COVID-19 has shifted so much ordering to digital. How are we going to be otherwise get customers back into physical marketplaces? The reality is that even in the digital market space, we still need to look at balancing equity. Right? Looking at authentic company values and making sure that we're not doing things that are just on brand. I know there are some coffee shops over the last year who have looked at things like Black Lives Matter and have wanted to, be part of the movement, but also need to do so in a way that recognizes that their social media feeds are projecting to multiple different audiences and therefore need to require a way that is equitable and accounts for all these different stakeholder views. So to form a SWOT analysis and incorporate those type of equitable considerations, it requires us to look both internally and externally at our organization. So a SWOT analysis is our strengths and weaknesses, which are things that we or you as business owners otherwise are able to look at, or things that are externally influenced by contextual circumstances around you. Those are opportunities or threats. The SWOT analysis, and there are lots of templates out there on the internet. This is kind of one of those common business school things that we tend to teach our students if you've not already done one. But certainly there are resources out there. They are ultimately getting you to look at how you can capitalize on what it is you do well, plug some gaps in what you don't do so well, look for opportunities that may arise in the environment that you can capitalize on because you do something well, or look at how you can otherwise avoid or shield yourself from threats. And the way, and certainly it is important to do so in a way that is otherwise equitable. To do this, it's also important to understand what is going on in the marketplace, particularly from a consumer perspective. And therefore, we would want to know, who is buying. I know in the last presentation, somebody asked, how do we understand something about the customers? Well, we do need to have some way of understanding. So I know that the SCA and NCA recently collaborated to come up with some market research and make that available to various members of the SCA community. There are other types of databases that are commercial, some are private. Certainly there's looking at web and social media, right? Doing market research can be very costly. And so it's not something that all small businesses have the luxury of doing. And that's why I think it's important that the SCA has these types of resources available for many of these retail businesses. One way of getting a foothold into the customer's needs and wants is to actually get on the ground with the customer. And that may require doing some focus groups or interviews. And I know that seems very marketing, ham-fisted to say, but it is important to understand something about your particular customer, particularly if you are already have a retail shop that is open. And even if you don't, as you're looking to build a shop, you want to understand the needs and wants of that community. So yes, having people in to do focus groups or to do a couple of interviews for an hour or two to understand what kinds of things your local customers want, or even if you're digital, to understand what kinds of ways that customers are looking for niches that don't exist. This is important to otherwise get that primary data, that the first-hand data, that the secondary data that is created by industry reports doesn't otherwise provide. Surveys are another way of going about doing this. You can come up with formal surveys. Customers, you run the risk of customers getting inundated with survey fatigue, particularly around recent politics. Consumers are kind of fatigued around surveys, so they can be a little bit difficult to achieve. But it even can be something as simple as informal research. When you get people where you're asking them, what caught your eye about our shop? What kinds of things are you looking for? What kinds of merchandise are you looking for? Are you searching for particular things or qualities of coffee that, when you come onto our site, how do you find navigating our website? All of these are very basic questions, but if you ask enough consumers about them, you can start to appreciate what it is that the consumers want and the consumers need. And that will help you better refine your consumer target market. The customer journey, the customer decision journey is linear to some extent, but it is also very non-linear. Right now, particularly in retail, and it's been a little bit of a struggle with COVID-19 shutting down some of those experiences, but consumers are really looking for those experiences. And certainly, as one of the presentations I heard earlier in the day was talking about, with Lara Marrero was talking about central business districts and the loss of central business districts, or not the loss of, but the kind of repurposing of central business districts into central social districts, as she called them. I thought that was actually very fascinating, because in the post-COVID world, those interactions and those experiences are going to be more important. Right? They were prior to COVID. They're going to be more important as consumers start to reemerge from society. But the reality is that you don't necessarily know where that next customer is going to be coming from. So we have typically, and when we break down the route to a purchase, we have a pre-purchase phase, which includes the idea that we understand where customers are recognizing their needs for coffee, their needs for beans, their needs for merch. We look at how they consider it. So this gets into some of the consumer decision-making processes, which unfortunately I don't have much time, or minimal time, to be able to get into in specifics, and also how they go about searching for new products, new services, new brands, and so on. They then move into the purchase stage, where that includes behaviors such as choice, ordering, and payment. Obviously, this is a critical stage that retailers have shifted during the course of COVID-19. where ordering has not necessarily been in a state of being in a retail store, but wholly online. So buying beans online, for example, instead of in the store, buying your coffee and then picking it up, or using Uber Eats, or using Odeco, right? Using Toast Tab. All of those things are ways that facilitate, particularly from point of sale, the purchase stage. And the last part is the actual engagement, service requests, and consumption. So we obviously know that consumers like to have, and that's why they're approaching a specialty coffee shop, that they're looking for a high quality cup of coffee. But what other things are going on after that fact? We don't always know what is going to be their next move. So I'll give you an example, a little bit of a personal example. Over the last couple of months, I had been talking to a farmer, Cynthia LaRue, in Nicaragua. She produces at Finca La Plata. And we've been direct messaging on Instagram back and forth. I've been kind of giving some of my 2 cents about marketing. And I know that she was going to have her crop coming into some roasters soon, her newest crop coming into some roasters soon. She had told me who those roasters were. One of them was Girls Who Grind in the UK. And so it just so happened that I ended up buying one of each of her bags from Girls Who Grind, and a couple of weeks later received my shipment of Cynthia LaRue's coffee from Nicaragua. Okay. The people at Girls Who Grind I actually had never really interacted with them at all. But I knew that they were the roasters that she was otherwise going to be working with. So my entry point was not necessarily directly from anything that I had seen from them or from anybody else, but from the farmer directly. So it is not always that you know where the next person, the next customer is going to be coming from. That path sometimes can be very nonlinear. And therefore, it is important that retailers understand all of the paths that consumers are using and leveraging as tools to get to them, because it's not always going to be what you're doing as a retailer, but it could be from other different points in the journey outside that process. It's important to look at segmentation and targeting and positioning, because you want to align your company with the market that you're particularly interested in. Oftentimes, we're looking at segmentation and target marketing from a geographic perspective, particularly in the context, certainly in the pre-COVID-19 context of local, small retailers, but not just limited to small retailers, but local small consumers are coming into stores physically. That gets a little bit trickier when we're looking at a broader, particularly digital distribution and e-commerce system. And there's an old adage, aim for the moon. If you miss, you may hit a star. Well, that's all nice and good to a certain extent. The problem is that if you aim for the moon, you may keep going and going and going and never actually hit a star. So having a strategy that understands a target market is certainly important, because you want to know that your investments in marketing are going to have any sort of actual success. So to do this, we use target marketing, market segmentation strategies. We can break down markets by geography. We can look even at the neighborhood level. We can break segments down into demographics, into psychographics, into specific behaviors, right? We maybe know that one customer or one market in the morning is specifically looking to go in and out. The caffeine delivery vehicle that they get their coffee, they're in, they're out. And particularly as COVID, has forced many retailers into e-commerce and using apps to do ordering, right? They may have that even faster and more prefer that, but you may have seen more pickup on that during the pandemic. As things start to reopen here in Boston, things are getting a little bit warmer. Tables and chairs are starting to go out. More people are being vaccinated. And as a result, we may actually see some of those people in the afternoon start to stick around. So the morning may be still the caffeine delivery vehicle, and in the afternoon might still be a little bit more lounging post-work sort of espresso. Maybe come up with some other type of new drink for the summer. And so certainly we can look at different behaviors targeting different markets. And the idea is then to use those different segmentation variables to construct segment profiles. And by constructing segment profiles, you can kind of get a sense of which markets are going to be the most responsive. The idea behind this is that if your business is going to be spending money on marketing investments, whether those investments are in your baristas and training, whether those investments are in your rent or your leases of equipment, if those are investments specifically into digital campaigns, any of those investments, you want to know that a target market is going to be responsive to those investments. Okay? So finding out, again, this is where market research becomes certainly important. Finding out what the target customer needs or wants becomes that much more important, because then you are able to better understand and satisfy both the needs and the wants of those customers. I like this little Venn diagram here about, the people that like sauce and my secret sauce. The target market is the people that like my secret sauce, right? Because you don't want necessarily one and miss. You don't want the other and miss. You want that middle section that is going to be the responsive section to what it is that you are currently doing. One reason that this is important, and as many people are discussing over the next day or so, is about branding, right? A couple of years ago, I was in Australia, in Brisbane, which is not the coffee city in Australia, but has quite a few roasters and quite a few cafes that serve specialty coffee. And the thing was, after 2 weeks there, I had been to about 16 different coffee shops, and I brought back about 12 different bags of coffee back to the US on my suitcases, a whole weekender's worth. And the idea really, though, is what makes each one different? Well, first of all, they actually don't have the same competition structure down in Brisbane. There was about 2 Starbucks that I had seen, and no Dunkin' Donuts. And so they're very much competing amongst themselves, and yet each one has its own offerings, its own sort of customer market. That maybe one shop is where somebody goes in the morning on their way to work, and that's their loyal shop that they're always going to. And another shop might be the one that they go to on their way home or during lunch break, where they're going to just, get a different. And so having these similarities, the fact that all these companies, these cafes were serving coffee and good coffee to boot, might be something that is, not distinct, but yet there were differences between each one, differences in their product offerings, maybe the specific drinks that they had, differences in their service, differences in the way that they particularly engage with community, differences in the way that their aesthetic was set up. So any of those types of things could be ways that you might differentiate yourself or your business in comparison with other businesses, particularly locally. These same things apply online as well. The reason that this applies is because consumers draw perceptions of brands. We can use, and I didn't have one for specialty coffee, of any specific brand. So I borrowed one from fashion, something called a perceptual map. And a perceptual map is a way to visually express competition in the marketplace, particular brand perceptions. You'll notice that there are 2 dimensions or 2 axes that these brands are on. Each one of these axes represents something different to consumers. And as you start to do a little bit of survey work, you can see how different your brand might be from another brand. You can leverage that to either position your own brand or strengthen your own brand positioning, or look for places where there might be opportunities that nobody else is existing. And maybe for good reason that nobody else is operating that in that perceptual lane. But it gives you a visual way to actually perceive this. By leveraging these types of perceptions and understanding what brand positioning is, the idea is to translate that to some sort of unique value proposition. And this is kind of a buzzword that is often used, but when you bring it back to what I had discussed at the beginning about what value is, value is a ratio of benefits to costs. It's perceived benefits to perceived costs. So you have to identify how your perceptions of what you are giving to stakeholders benefits them, and what is costing you is maybe is of value or of merit to give up. So kind of a template that I have here, and I color coded to refer both to the template and so forth. This is Coffee Collective in Copenhagen, Denmark. I had a chance to get to go to a couple of their shops when I was there the summer before COVID, and they're, I think, fairly well known for doing sustainable things in the marketplace, both from a social perspective and from an ecological perspective. So if I was to kind of, as a marketing professor, spitball what their unique value proposition is, I would say that they're, for the coffee drinker who is interested in trying coffee brands from around the world and supports paying a fair price for a quality cup of coffee, so that is focused on a specific target market. The Coffee Collective is the B Corporation coffee roaster retailer with a big heart and sustainable impact. And so that's kind of a perception that we might have of them, competing mainly with global coffee roasters. So those are other competitors that they might be looking at, particularly because of their size and scope, who are transparent with their sourcing and pay. So this is one area where they've particularly tried to make some sort of differentiating benefit, is in increasing their transparency and their price transparency in particular, because Coffee Collective offers and ships a variety of premium coffees to customers around the world, which enables them to pay living wages to their employees and farmers. All of those things are elements that are unique, or mostly unique, to the Coffee Collective. And so we could say that this is what they do, this aspirational statement of towards a target consumer. This is what they do differently and better than somebody else in the marketplace, in among their competition. Right? There are other ways that other competitors might differentiate themselves, right? And so they might be better on something else. They might be better on shipping. They might be better at services in cafes. They might be better, right? But the idea, the whole goal of this is to set up something that shows uniquely what it is you do. And in doing that, that not only maybe it should provide some sense of purpose, but it also sets the tone of what strategies you're attempting to do for consumers and for other stakeholders. So yes, branding is important. It's important to have a nice image. It's important to put something on a storefront. It's important to have nice bag packaging, but it's also important to have that identity, those experiences, those relationships. There are tangible and intangible elements that brand building offers, and it is important then to have authenticity in building those brands. Right? What value do consumers associate with your company? So you see here, that's my cat. His name is Ukro. And if you are wondering why he's named Ukro, it is actually after the Ethiopian coffee cooperative in Jeddah. Over the last year, while I was home with everybody else, I had decided, this was the first year that we had hit him, and I decided to order his namesake coffee from as many roasters as I could find across the United States, Canada, and wherever else. And so every time I was searching Google to find, people who sold Ukro. And it turned out over the course of the year, I had 35 different roasters across the United States and Canada who all sold Ukro coffee. The point is, so there's Ukro, and I had a whole Instagram thing, hashtag Ukro with Ukro. He posed with all these coffee bags, but the bigger thing is that you can see there are different brands, different brand identities, and all of them are trying to communicate something different. They're trying to communicate the value of the Ukro cooperative. They're trying to communicate the value of roasting. They're trying to communicate the value of the bean itself. Okay, but when it comes to 35 roasters, right? It becomes then difficult if all of them are carrying, if all of these are roasting the same coffee, then there has to be other things that they are otherwise differentiating on. And so creating that strong brand, that strong mission, that strong sense of purpose becomes important. So that way you don't get lost, particularly as consumers are ordering digitally and have a wide variety of options to choose from. If you want them coming back to you, it is important to make sure that the brand is authentic and that the brand is communicating something to the consumer, that the brand is communicating value to the consumer. So branding occurs through both tangible elements such as signage, communication tone, employees and store aesthetics, but also through intangible elements such as the equity or equitability that you're creating through employees and the value chain, through service procedures that you have that are, second to none, or maybe you're more casual sort of shop that is not, is looking to be more intimate with the customers. Maybe it is about creating experiences that customers haven't actually had at other retail locations, particularly as COVID. You may be the first coffee shop that a customer is visiting in months, and recommunicating and connecting and sharing those types of experiences may be important to some consumers' experience. These are a couple of examples of coffee companies that I think are really kind of clever in their branding. First, we have Luminous up in the top left there from Las Vegas, and we see their packaging design looks like an American Chinese takeaway carton. And each coffee that they roast has a slightly different version of the package, and sometimes includes some goodies as well. Obviously, from a retail perspective, La Marzocco Cafe is one of a kind with a unique roaster in residence program. Luna Coffee up in Vancouver, Canada has unique packaging and artwork on each of their coffees. And one of my favorites of recent has been the 1616 has been Coffee Black out of Memphis, Tennessee, who often is trying to communicate to consumers the historical origins of coffee as a colonized product, and bring it back to some of those original Ethiopian roots. And in doing so, they're creating a brand that is specific, not just about the coffee coming from Ethiopia and other places that otherwise has made its way through to, but also about the history behind coffee and the reason why 1616 exists as an important date within the coffee industry. So I think that there are various ways that these brands' identities can be shaped, not just by simple labeling, but by the way that you're creating that authentic, that brand authenticity and brand purpose to the consumer. A third, or actually this would be a fifth one, is Three Keys Coffee down in Houston, Texas. I really like this. I'm a big jazz fan. I like collecting jazz records on vinyl, and Three Keys Coffee the three keys refers to the three keys on a trumpet. And you can see here in the top left, they have a notes wheel that is kind of like the coffee notes wheel, but it is aligned with notes from jazz, and it's kind of a play on words. This one particular coffee they came out with called Love Bird was an homage to Charlie Bird Parker. And you can see here, I'm brewing it up with Charlie Bird Parker's album at home. And on the back of the bag, they have QR codes that bring consumers to the bottom left was a Spotify playlist that they had collaborated on and otherwise was meant to be listened to while you were brewing and sipping the coffee. So the goal behind this then was to be able to kind of, the brand provides this experience even at home. And this is important to the consumer because they want to know that they are with this authentic brand that is very jazz oriented in the motif, but also in the experience as well. So what does the consumer need to do that? So what does the retailer need to do then to be able to get value to market? We often look at something called the 4 Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. And really, we can kind of look at this and reframe those kind of staid 4 Ps as solutions and creating value, value capture, value delivery, and value access, and communication and information of value. So A newer way that I think is more expansive of looking at these 4Ps is to look at something called the Siva Model. And the Siva Model kind of takes the traditional 4Ps you see in the center here, and it kind of realigns them to a more expansive and even a little bit more broad encompassing terms. The first is to look at, instead of looking at products or services, to look at solutions, to design offerings around meeting customer needs or wants rather than just around coffee, right? We're looking for solutions, and consumers are looking for solutions, and marketers are looking for solutions. And yes, coffee is one of those products that's the goal. It's why we're here. It's why we have a specialty coffee association. But we just said that coffee community, and particularly specialty coffee, has other ways of creating value that are not just economic based. Here's money, here's a cup of coffee. Right? We talked about collaboration and we talked about community. And those are things that are solutions that specialty coffee can offer. Information, providing a two-way dialogue that is relevant to customer needs at the different stages of their customer journeys. So we used to look at this as a bunch of just promotional stuff, giving coupons or a discount, doing things that is like here, with somebody mentioned in an earlier presentation, the loyalty cards and, buy 6, get 1 cup free, right? But it's not just about those things. It's about creating this two-way dialogue that is relevant to different needs at different stages of the customer journey. Different customers, different markets are going to be at different stages in their journeys at different times. And so providing this constant two-way dialogue becomes important to the consumer, as well as to get information and feedback for you as the business owner. Okay. The third one is value, to demonstrate benefits relative to price, not just price economics, right? A consumer knows, particularly if they're coming into a specialty coffee shop, that they might be spending $2 or $3 on a shot of espresso. They might know that they're spending $3 or $4, $5, $6 on a coffee, but they need to know why. Some customers are interested in having this information, particularly specialty customers, but not always. And so there has to be ways that you demonstrate that coffee is worth $6 that is just beyond just, okay, this is what the price is set for. And particularly getting and training staff to be able to communicate that value as well. The last one in this model is access, to allow customers to consume when, where, and how they want in their customer journeys. Again, COVID sort of really disrupted access by reducing the physical spaces that consumers could otherwise be operating in. But we now have this area where consumers can now buy more easily digitally. They can buy and check out digitally. They can have loyalty programs digitally. They can buy beans digitally. And all of those are things that we're now, and I think that marketers and coffee retailers are looking at figuring out how exactly we can combine those two things together, both the digital and the physical, as COVID starts to let up a little bit on the consumers. So let's talk about each of these things and a little bit of coverage. Yes, you're offering coffee, but what other value are you creating for the consumer? Is it about someone like me who shows up in a city for a conference, goes into a coffee shop and wants to just start talking to a barista about what they've got on bar, what coffees they're retailing? Is it where you have that barista customer knowledge transfer? Is it about the employee skills that you're building up your employees and giving them skills to progress within your organization, within your shop, right? Building managerial skills, building QC or production skills if you're a roaster. Now, all those things are important ways that you can create value with stakeholders. Is it about creating a culture of employee equity and inclusivity, and not just to be diverse for diversity's sake, but to actually be inclusive in what it is that your business is doing, to be authentic? Here is Bean and Bean Coffee in New York. They just posted this a couple of days ago on Instagram that talked about all the neat and exciting ways that they're essentially creating value. They talk about making donations to Bean Voyage to help women coffee producers. They talk about donating 5,000 cups of coffee to frontline workers in New York, right? Those are ways that value is otherwise created that is not necessarily just a transactional benefit. It is social, it is environmental, and it has long-term benefits to this company. April in Copenhagen has created not just it doesn't just roast coffee, but they've created product lines that are beyond that, including a dripper, including a garments that are wearable for during the workday for baristas. They include retail locations and design aesthetics. Okay, all of those are ways that can be value can be created. We have ways of closing the loop on products. Right? Husky Cup, based in Australia, some people may carry these in their stores. Their cups are actually made from chaff from coffee. And what they have is a system called the Husky Swap, which is kind of a loop-based system where you swap out one cup for a dirty cup. A customer comes in, they have had a beverage in a dirty cup. They give you the dirty cup and you wash it in your sanitizer and you make a new drink in a new fresh cup. And now the person takes that away. There is constantly cups going back and forth. It is a very unique business model because what it essentially does, it leases the cup or the vessel to the customer and allows them to always get a fresh cup with a new beverage while not having to use paper takeaway cups. Okay. Capturing value. We know that price is not the only thing that value is equal to. Value can be social, value can be environmental, value can be economic, right? You could say customers, and I think most of you probably know these customers that will come in and say, wow, why is this cup $6? Why is this cup of Pedregal $6? Why is this pour over $12 for this geisha? Why is this, right? Customers don't always know these things. What they see is a price and they don't know what the value actually is. So price and value are disaggregated, and they're in the absence of information. Customers look at price as, quality. Well, price and quality can be related. There is a correlation between the two, but it's not always necessary. So what is price? Price is the monetary sum of all the values customers give up in order to get the benefits of having a product or service. So price can also reflect convenience. Price can reflect increased or less time of spent making a decision. So a wide menu board with 15 different coffees may cause a consumer to have cognitive overload, right? So shrinking down the number of coffees and maybe charging more for being and curating those types of coffees might be of value. So yes, it is important to look at break-even prices. It is important to look and be able to cover both fixed and variable costs. It is important to look at labor. It is important to have pay equity for baristas and other staff. It is important to have pay equity for farmers up the value chain, but it is not to be at the behest also of what the consumer is looking for, right? Comparing yourself to other shops, looking at cupping and quality scores, looking at the community impact you're doing. Consumers are willing to pay for those things, not just the cup of coffee, but they need to know what value is that you're offering. The distribution strategy or value delivery or access, ensuring access to coffee and closing the loop on value chains, right? COVID's altered distribution, and some of these things have been talked about, right? It's even altered some of the product innovation, right? So here's Black and White Roasters down in North Carolina showing off some of their draft lattes in gallon jugs or half-gallon jugs. Right? That was one of those things early on. I know Sprudge had written up an article, are draft lattes in jugs, going to be the new trend? And maybe they are, right? Maybe some of these innovations have been helpful to consumers and they're valuable to consumers. But we also see distribution in other ways. We don't think about distribution in terms of just retail in a physical location, right? It's not just about being able to order through Odeco and come and pick it up. It is not just about being able to order through Toast Tab and have a full menu and pick it up. It is also being able to order beans, for example, on Instagram. Right, here's Onyx, who offers merch, who offers gear, who offers bags of coffee directly available to purchase through Instagram. Okay, those are innovations that have kind of come up. They've come up naturally by platforms, but also by the way that businesses are using them. And so distribution and the access that consumers have to those brands is important. Again, you don't know necessarily where your next customer is coming from all the time. So if they see something on Instagram and they're scrolling through and it has a link to be able to purchase the beans, that facilitates and makes it easier for that purchase to occur. The last P is promotional strategies or value communication, right? Why should somebody visit your store? What is it that you do? And why and how should somebody know? Oftentimes when we talk about communication, right, we talk about promotional strategies. We think about things like sending out flyers and so forth. Like here's one, Revolver in Vancouver. There's they were open in an alley because of COVID. You couldn't go through the main entrance, so they wanted to let customers know, right? It is about letting customers know, making customers aware. Sometimes it's about something like, where is your place? Sometimes it's about, how do I get there? Sometimes it's about, how do I find you online? It's about creating awareness of the value that you're offering, right? So again, everything, if you remember those 4 Ps, everything at the center is about value, creating, capturing, communicating, and delivering value. So we are trying to communicate where that value is and what that value is. Where do you promote? Who is your target market? Do you promote on Instagram? Do you promote on on Facebook? Is it about website? Is it about mobile search, right? Is it about search engine optimization? All too often, and I see this, I think, especially in the specialty coffee industry, because it lends itself to be a very Instagrammable industry, and that is a large focus on Instagram. Pew Research recently, last week actually, I got these updated. Pew Research just said has done some survey work on where American adults are using social media. You look at this, and 40% of U.S. adults are on Instagram. 40%. That's less than half. 69% on Facebook and 81% on YouTube. You see that increase, probably because of COVID, has gone up over the last year. When we break those numbers down, we can look at them by age, we can look at them by income level, we can look at them by location, whether it is urban, suburban, or rural, whether it's men versus women. All of these things can be broken down, but fundamentally, yes, a younger audience is going to be looking at Instagram, and even maybe the 30 to 49-year-old audience will largely go to Instagram. But if you're looking for an older audience over 50, and certainly many retail businesses are, then you may not just be able to look at Instagram alone. Right? You may still have to do traditional Facebook advertising or traditional Facebook posting. You may have to look at traditional digital marketing, including email marketing, which is still effective, including having a website that is functional and that communicates what customers want to know and what customers need to know, communicating the hours of service, communicating what is on the menu, communicating what your location is, communicating if you have COVID protocols, what those are, and when your shop is going to be closed, and doing so in a timely manner so a customer who's coming today knows what's going on. One day we'll get back to business as usual. We'll have, be back in normal, and we'll be looking towards events. Having farmers come in, having cuppings I don't know what the future of cuppings will hold in retail locations. I certainly like to do them at one of my local shops, but I don't know if they're going to be doing them that much in the near future anytime soon. But these types of events, again, if we talk about the social interaction that customers are looking for, are going to be important. Or even still, I'm thinking back to when Populous Coffee had done its Flight of Fancy over the last several years and given consumers the opportunity to be able to participate in something global, participate in a concept, and very similar to James Hoffmann's world's largest coffee cupping at home, right? Those are things that bring people together, that bring a community together, that bring the value of specialty coffee together. And I think that they're going to be important, not just at home, but as businesses and physical spaces reopen as well. As we start to kind of wrap this up, we look at things like the strategic implementation in developing an action plan. So these are all ways, and this whole part of the plan so far has been to develop strategies, to look at what strategies it is, what tactics we need. So we need to ask ourselves then, what the ways that we execute these strategies are, what the timeline for execution is, what the budgeting is, to be able to do all of these things once we've written down what it is we're doing, why it is we're doing it, who it is we're doing it for, where it is we're going to be doing, and so forth. So once we've executed, and as we start executing, we look to measure what our successes are. Right? What determines whether or not your plan is actually working? What are your key success factors? Is it bags sold per month? Is it the fact that you're able to pull off donations, on a regular basis? Is it about closing wholesale accounts? Is it any of those types of things? How do you assess the triple bottom line? How do you assess your economic impact, your social impact, your environmental impact? And what kinds of modifications can you take if issues arise? One way of doing this is to come up with some sort of sustainability report. So, if I may use Coffee Collective again as an example, they've recently come out with they've come out with the last couple of years a sustainability report, and this includes their pricing transparency to look at this from an economic perspective and the various elements of who it is and how much they're paying and what they're paying FOB, what they're, if they can, what they're paying at farm gate and so forth. But it also includes other indicators like how much electricity they're using at different shops, what their water usage is, how is, the heat that's running and is going to be burning energy. All of those things are environmental indicators that they're showing the impact of what it is they do and where things can otherwise be reduced or improved, right? So all of those things are important to understanding and being able to look back and reflect at different periods in time on the success of this marketing plan. So with that, I'd like to thank Cindy Patterson of Caravelle Coffee because she helped me actually look at this from an equitable standpoint. And I just wanted to give her a shout out. If anybody has any questions, I know we have some time for Q&A and I'd be happy to take any, or if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'd be more than happy to answer questions as well. So.
Thank you, applause. I'm sure there's digital applause out there. You just dropped all sorts of knowledge and so quickly. I know it's a semester.
That was an entire semester course in an hour.
Yes, that was very impressive. And yes, we do have some questions coming in. So if anybody has any more questions, drop them into the Q&A tab in the chat. But just, I guess we'll start with the plan itself, or when you start to put this together as a business owner, and like how often should you revisit the plan and the goals? I know you started to talk about measuring at the end, but especially those SMART goals that you were talking about, how often would you recommend revisiting those?
I suppose it depends on the business and where the stage in the business is. I think new businesses particularly are looking at a shorter period of time because you're looking to measure success, particularly as you grow and are looking to be sustainable. A business with a little bit more longevity has some luxuries of understanding where it's been, where it's going, and so the time frame can be a little bit longer duration, 6 months to a year. But if you're new, you're looking on a weekly basis, you're looking on a monthly basis, and you're looking at those month over month sorts of increments first, because that will allow you some strategic window to be able to make those adjustments. And that's one of the things you want to be able to do, is to be able to make adjustments. So looking too often becomes problematic because you are not giving yourself any time, and you're not giving your strategies or your tactics any time to actually unfold and work. You're not giving any lead time to them. However, if you're not looking enough, you're not actually finding out where it is that you're actually erroring and where you can make and fine tune those adjustments. So it really is dependent, I think, on where in the context of the business's life cycle they are, that knows kind of, if I make an adjustment, it's going to actually reflect itself within the next 6 months. Or if I make an adjustment, it's going to reflect itself within 2 weeks. So I think it really is specific to each business, but you want to give yourself enough time, but not too much time to make those adjustments.
Yeah, it's a balance. Yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So here's another question. One of the first speakers discouraged retailers from copying and pasting someone else's business plan. So do you think that's true for marketing plans, or would you have any marketing plan template recommendations for a coffee retailer to utilize?
So I actually heard that question earlier, and I very much thought along the same lines. Oftentimes in my course, I have students present and over the semester create marketing plans for potential businesses that I'd love to see them get off the ground and be entrepreneurial with. And I provide them with a couple of different templates, and oftentimes they say, what do you want on the final project and how do you want this? And I say, there are these templates I've given you, there are templates out there online, but nobody, when you get out there, is going to give you something and say, this is what you need to do, and this is how you need to do it. And so the idea of a template is good as a jumping off point, as a point of departure for most businesses. And I'm in agreement, I think, with the earlier speaker. That is to say, if you start using somebody else's, it pigeonholes you into thinking you're doing what they need to do, and it doesn't necessarily cause the same effect for you. So, excuse me. If you look at kind of the structure that I've set up, a lot of the structure that I've set up in the way that I even presented today has been kind of in the context of a marketing plan, where you start with this, you then go to do some analyses. I mean, I did not get to go in, substantive depth in an hour, but you start looking at the different kinds of macro environment, micro environment, organizational stuff. You start building out your segmentation, and you start looking at these things. And by looking at this that almost is a framework for doing a marketing plan that can be used in more depth and created in more depth. I mean, students often complain. I say they got a 20-page limit because, it's a class project and I have to grade these things too. But oftentimes they kind of balk at it. And what they realize at the end of the semester is, by going through all these parts of the plan intimately, 20 pages actually becomes it really ends up being a cap for them, because they've got more that they need to say. And if you're a retailer, you're definitely going to have more than 20. I would expect to have more than 20 pages, because as you think about these things, you're creating them from scratch, and you're creating them from the ideas that you have, it becomes much more robust than, using a standard template and trying to fill it in, or trying to copy somebody else's plan. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually in agreement with what the speaker said before, and I would kind of say these are the basic parts and kind of go in more depth from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine you would probably, just like your students, have more as you go through it and you ask yourselves these questions and go through each part. There's lots more to dive into. Great.
Absolutely. It's an iterative process as well.
Yeah. And also ongoing, right? It's like you mentioned, revisiting and depending on where you are in your business, it's going to change over time. And just like consumer or the world changes with the pandemic, like where we are now.
And I think we've seen, and certainly the pandemic's given some retailers an opportunity to kind of revisit that. But I think there are also some who have been modeled after what they did 2-3 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, haven't picked it up. And, there's never a bad time, I think, to revisit it and say, here's where we're at and what we need to start thinking going forward.
Yeah, for sure. And so what about staff and training them on, if you're a business owner gathering this market research and understanding a lot about consumers, you're probably learning a lot also from your staff on consumers. But how would you train your staff on that? Like, is there that balance between bringing them in too much or I don't know. I was just thinking about how they could be best supported with knowledge to be able to speak to the customers.
So I can say from personal experience, I've been to places where the person at the till is trained at the till and the person on bar is trained at the bar, and the two are very distinctive. And I might come up and ask a bar question and the person on the till does not know how to answer it. And sometimes, especially in a busy period, because they have no knowledge, I end up not knowing anything and kind of have to be like, okay, I'll roll with the punches. And, when in Rome, here's the way that they offer this. And that's certainly one level of, customer service training that one might offer. Personally, I think that all the employees should be empowered. Now, to what extent, you're right. I think that there is a point of saying, I don't think there's harm in giving employees too much information. I think that it is easier to empower employees with information that allow them to facilitate transactions with customers than it is to disempower them and have to feel like they're being micromanaged and that they have to go ask the manager, or they have to go ask a shift leader, or they have to go ask somebody else. Again, I think there's kind of a balance there between what you do and how you empower that person, because that person, right, the person at the till, they don't want to feel embarrassed that they don't know the answer to a question and that a customer is calling them out for that. And that weighs mentally on the state of the person at the till. I think all too often there's kind of a neglect, or people know everything and you really feel like you're having that interaction where, that person, okay, they are really good at making lattes and so forth, but that doesn't preclude them from interacting with me as a customer at the till. So I don't think that there's harm in empowering employees to give consumers a fuller experience as they need and also feel empowered themselves.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, so we're totally out of time. I didn't realize it, but we do have this one last question about the templates that you talked about.
Yes.
If you're able to.
Yeah, I can. I think I can do the one that I have for my students. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we can actually work to get it posted on the site or within the website. So,
Sure.
So yes, thank you so much, Spencer. This was really,
Thanks for having me.
really
Appreciate
great.
it.
We appreciate it, and yeah, it looks like this brings us to the end of the first day of Retail Summit. So just kind of as a closing, it's been such an incredible day of different content and focusing a lot on the business of coffee, business planning, the models, marketing plans, the internal staff culture. There was talks through that and systems and structure internally. We talked about digital experiences and strategy with Laura, and then investments in retail. So I just feel like so much, my mind is blown of how much content that we went through today. So thank you to our title sponsor, Pacific Foods Barista Series, for helping make this summit possible. Thank you to our lead sponsor, BWT, San Remo, Barista, Barazza, and to our supporting sponsors, Nutrimilk and La Marzocco. And thank you all for coming, and we'll be back for our day 2 tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific, and with a whole other day full of content. So everybody have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.